She needs a date to her best friend's gala. He wants to settle down. Can they get past their hang-ups to see that they should be together? This is the premise of The Accidental Swipe by me, Y.M. Nelson. This steamy contemporary romance features Jason and Fortune, two people who've given up on love and are urged to use an online dating app to find someone. When they find each other, the attraction is undeniable, but their jaded outlooks on love based on past emotional hurt may keep them from getting together. The Accidental Swipe releases on July 25th, 2023. Go to ymnelson.com for all of the latest details. This is the Nerdy Romantics Podcast, and I'm your host, Y.M. Nelson. Episode 10 discusses the book The One. However, we'll also get into a little bit about the Netflix show, and it will include spoilers of both the book and the show. This is a good one, everyone. So if you haven't read the book The One and you don't want to be spoiled, take a moment, go read the book, then come back and join us. Okay, so today's episode, we are talking the book, the novel, The One by John Mars. And we have on the line Staci, Marcie, Dana, and Pam, our new nerdy romantic who we've recruited. Also, full disclosure, she's a longtime friend. And what we usually do here is talk about what we're reading that we want to share right now, or just what we like to read. If you're not reading anything right now, what genres you like to read in. So let's start with Pam, since she's new. Pam.
Yes, ma'am.
What are you reading right now that you want to share? Or what do you like reading in general?
Well, right now I'm reading a lot of things that are more of self-help type books that are helping me more with taking time for self, looking at my emotions and the things that are important. And so I think pretty much that's where I'm going. That's my genre for right now, just in terms of doing self-help.
All right. How about you, Dana?
Sure. So, as you already all know, I'm into the Douglas Child and Preston and Douglas Child group of books, the Pendergast series. Now, I finished all 23 of them, I think now, but they have other books that they've written together where it's not Pendergast isn't the main character. So now I'm reading one called Thunderhead, and it's basically, it seems like the introduction and background to the Nora Kelly character for anybody who may be reading those books. And it actually came out, I think, in the 90s. So it's actually one of the older books. I listened to it and it's 17 hours long and I'm loving it.
Awesome. Marcie?
Well, my general genre tends to be mostly African-American fiction. I do tend to, because I have Kindle Unlimited, a lot of it is urban fiction. But right now, actually, I am reading Iris Bowling from her Nate Rain series. She is a local writer from Virginia, and I've been following her since her Heart series debut. And so Nate Rain's is more of her mystery suspense, not as much on the romance side, and it's part of a trilogy. So that's what I'm reading right now.
Awesome. And Staci, what are you reading right now?
Well, currently I'm reading another John Mars book called What Lies Between Us. This is actually the third book I've read of his. It started with The One.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
You can tell, I like the books. So,
well, I'm happy to introduce a new author to you. This is a new author to me as well, but as we know from a previous episode, we kind of found this through the Netflix series, The One, which it has completed its first season. It is said that it will get a second season, I believe. And because of our, shall we say, mediocre feelings about the show, I thought, why not do a book chat about the actual book from where the show originated? So we read the book, and because of our different reactions, we have such an opposite reaction from most of the nerdy romantics that you're hearing today. We decided to do a podcast episode on it. So in general, y'all, what did you think about the book as far as your impressions after you've seen the show?
So this is Marcie, and I will have to say that I remember reading maybe the first 3 pages and sending a message saying, this is nothing like the show. I really felt like this was not even the same thing. It was so different, in fact, that almost by the time I got a third of the way through, I wasn't even considering the series as being the same thing. I was honestly considering series more based on than ever being actually true to the novel itself.
Anybody else? What y'all think?
For me, if you've listened to some of the previous podcasts when we talked about the TV show, you can tell I did not like the TV show at all. I mean, I one who suggested it because I thought the premise would be nice and I thought it'd be interesting, but I end up not enjoying the TV show. But when I start reading the book, or rather listening to the book on my way home, I just really enjoyed the book. It was such a difference for me that I got even probably madder about the TV show because I enjoyed the book so much. And I have to do the same thing with Marcie. Is when you first suggested listening to or reading the book, I was like, maybe not, because I didn't enjoy the TV show. But when I was listening to it while driving, I was like, who is this? Who's this related to the person? And then I was like, you didn't like the show, don't even try to think of it. Just listen to the book. And once I did that, it didn't take long. I mean, that was within, like Marcia said, 3 or 4 pages. I was maybe about 20 minutes, if that, or 15, 20 minutes into it. And it's like, doesn't really sound anything like it. But once I started listening to it and kind of totally disregarding the TV show on it, it just really got my attention and held my attention throughout the whole book. Much better to me. This was so much better that I really hate the TV show because I really enjoyed this book.
Oh boy.
So I'll piggyback off of Staci. So because I'm not a bah humbug, I did not dislike the show. I actually thought the show was good. However, before that we even start watching the show, I already had questions. So how the DNA match, there's so many different things that I felt like could go wrong, or things we talked about, what happens if you find out that the person is the same sex as you, and maybe you didn't think that you were into that. Or what if, we talked about a lot of stuff, what if your person is dead? A whole bunch of different things that we discussed. For what the show was, I liked it. What I recall from the review of the show I didn't like is they started to try to get into the science part of the DNA match, but they couldn't really explain it. So they just gave you enough of a hint for it to bother me, because you couldn't explain yourself. So why even talk about it? And I think that's one of the places I think the book did way better for me. We didn't even talk about the science of how it worked. Nobody cares. We're just going to say it works. And let's go with the part that we really, because none of us are scientists trying to figure out how to do this in real life. We're here for the story about the people to see what happens. And I feel like that's certainly where the book gave us so much more. They addressed a lot of those questions I had before even watching the show. So while I think the show was good, it's definitely something that needs another season, because there's just too many open-ended things that I feel like they didn't address that they really need to address. Because if I thought about them, I know other people did too. And so I assume that's what they're going to do with the second season. But yes, the book was definitely better than the show. No.
Pam, did you watch the show?
No, I did not. And I was going to mention that because just listening to your comments and then going along with what I read in the book and how detailed the characters were and all the moving and twists and turns, my fear is that when I watch the TV show, it might let me down, but I'm going to try to stay open and we'll get a chance to watch it and I will give you all my feedback once I do.
Okay. So actually having not watched the show, what did you think about the book?
Oh, wow. I thought the book was pretty awesome. Of course, it was gruesome in parts for me, which I don't do gruesome a whole lot. I saw some small love stories within it as well. I also saw some craziness in it, but I always try to come up with a theme that just kind of sticks out with me. And the thing that came up for me was curiosity killed the cat. Yeah. And what I mean by that is, so basically that sometimes when we're curious about things, sometimes it can lead to danger or misfortune.
I'll piggyback on that while we're waiting for her to come back and say that I, like Dana, enjoyed the show, but I do think that there was, to Pam's point, a lot more depth and character development in the book. And I also did feel that I actually enjoyed the gruesome element a little bit more because I felt like it kind of broke up the main storyline a little bit without taking away from it. And I see that Pam's back, so I'm gonna give the stage back to her.
Okay. Pam?
Okay, the only other thing I was going to say, and actually, Marcie, you were going into that. I think many times throughout the chapters in the book, when things would happen, my mouth just went wide open, like, are you serious? And I think it was just so surprising for me that it definitely kept my attention. So it kept my curiosity, but I also see that curiosity can definitely cause issues and problems for people, and that's what happened.
So let's get into a little bit, now that we've given our overall impression, let's get into the stories and the characters. What did we think in general of all the different stories that they had going? I think Dana mentioned a little bit about we've got a little bit more depth and that they need a little, what do we think of all the different stories in the book and the depth that they give?
Well, I have to say my absolute favorite story, and the one I could have just paid attention to the whole time, was going to be the Mandy and Richard situation.
Oh,
Not
yeah.
only, and so now I listened to this, by the way, and I think there were like, Staci, I don't know if you listened to this, but I think there were like 4 women characters, actually different women who actually voiced these characters. And I thought it was the same woman the whole time. But anyway, Mandy really stood out to me because I liked her accent and everything. And she had a slight dinginess to her, which I feel like read according to the character because the way she goes along with having a baby from a guy, all the kind of stuff she did. There's some slight dinginess there where I would have been like, yeah, I'm not having a baby of somebody, that I never even met and all this other stuff. But I didn't see the whole thing with Richard. I honestly thought he was dead. They really played it very well in terms of going to his memorial. Friends and family were there to say goodbye. I did not realize that he was just in a coma somewhere. So I think that just gave their story just even more like, wow, the twists and turns in Mandy and Richard's story. I was here for it.
And I enjoyed Mandy and Richard's story as well. Because like you said dinginess, and I thought, to me, kind of a desperation. I thought, which I really kind of liked about this was that it was talking more about how the one and finding the one was kind of changing our society in a way, or changing society and about thoughts about relationships and the value of your relationships, because she placed a premium on a relationship with her match. Because when we listened to that, and she was married, and he found his one or whatever and divorced her and left her, and both of her sisters, and I didn't realize that was 4 different women as well who voiced those actresses, but when he talks about her sisters and her sisters, allegedly are married to their matches. And she talked about their children and how if I have children with someone outside of my match, they're not the same. It's not going to be as great. She basically insulted her sister, who has been lying all along that she was not matched with her husband, They just love each other. That's it. It wasn't they found each other. They just say they're a match because that's the thing it seems that people were doing at that point. Is like your marriage is not going to be a real marriage if you're not married to your one. And that's why I kind of like not just that, but that how that is putting like an extra hardship in a way or extra fear for people. Like if I'm married to this person, it's like, are y'all matched? Not if you love them, not, if you have shared interests, it's if you're matched, and that trumps all. And she bought into that. And so she's with, even though she thinks for the whole time that he's dead, she's willing to do all this stuff to be with her match, or, to have a child with her dead match, to isolate herself from her family because she kind of clings to his family because they see the warning signs, they see the red flags because they actually love her. But she's so focused on my match, and if I can't have a match, let me have a child by my match. I did like her story. There's some of the stories that I was more into than others, but definitely Mandy and Richard were one of those that I was really interested in. We say Mandy and Richard, but it's really Mandy and Richard's mother. So
yeah.
Who I was most interested, not the most interested, but one of the ones that I was like really made me think about how we always put pressure on women anyway. We all, oh, you're not married yet, you don't have any kids, the single, that kind of thing. And now you got an extra addition of you're not married, you haven't found the one yet. They got to be out there. It's like I think that's just, to me, was seeing the added pressure of that.
I think I need to piggyback right here because I think my favorite couple of Christopher and Amy was the opposite of that. Like he was really driven. He was interested in the match, and they were polar opposites. And it was watching the concept of your one and what you do, whether that one, I think the same thing kind of with Ellie and Tim is, what if your one isn't what you thought your one was going to be? And the two different ways that people change within those relationships to try to mold themselves to the concept of the one. And so I think in both of their relationships, that's really what I was drawn to, is what if how they change themselves within these relationships just because they were accepting this premise of this person is my match. I think that was also part of something that was really stuck out to me. So you see Mandy's desperation to have a match, and then you see these people who aren't really sure when they see their match that their match is actually their match, but they're willing to do a whole lot of things and a whole lot of changing to try to fit into that mold. And I think that's is it because it's the match, or do we do that in all relationships anyway?
Yeah, I have to piggyback and agree on that. That's what kind of compelled me with Christopher and Amy. It's like, what if your match is not exactly all up about your values? Amy is the cop and Christopher is the serial killer. I'm like, do I really, do I really like this? And then on the other side of it, Christopher actually kind of changing his values and what he values, which is killing innocent females, and actually thinking, wow, maybe I actually have some feelings. Maybe I'm actually not the person that I think I am, And so he changes. What also compelled me was the Jade and Kevin non-match. Jade was trying to be there for Kevin, but we find out she's really actually not matched with Kevin. She's trying to change, but then she realizes, no, I can't do it. But I am going to do this. I am going to be morally, I'm going to be with him because he is dying. But after he passes, she just, she cannot resist her match. Pam, what about you? What did you think of the different stories, and which set of characters or which story kind of spoke to you the most?
I I would say I'm definitely more intrigued with Christopher and Amy just because of looking at them individually in terms of Christopher seeing himself as a normal person, even though we're seeing him as a serial killer, but he saw himself as quite normal in terms of his relationships, in terms of even as a young person, when even people were calling him a psycho then, he still saw himself as a sane person, even though he was choosing to do all of these things, which most of us would say was insane, and then grouping himself with a cop of all people. Just the relationship there, and how, and even in the end, how Amy totally had to accept the fact that I'm loving a killer here, or I'm matched with a killer, and now I have to kill him. So I just thought that was a great that whole piece with Christopher and Amy. But the other piece I was going to mention too is just looking at different ones. Like for instance, Nick totally changed the way he thought things were going to be just because he was matched with a man. And it just changed everything that he did in terms of his relationship with Sally, his choice to leave, for a bit. It uprooted everything that he believed and thought was supposed to be. And then because Sally kind of pushed it, he decided to follow another path, and it just changed everything. So I was intrigued definitely by them as well.
Nick and Sally's was probably I will not say favorite, but the one I was most interested in, because as you said, Nick he didn't to me totally change, but he changed. He was someone who, like I said, who was straight. He's never had a relationship with another man and all that, and no interest in another man until he meets Alex. That's the closest one I've seen to the show. If you remember that one couple in the show.
Yeah.
But instead she didn't trick him, but she forced it. But I think part of it, she forced it to find out, okay, are we really meant to be together? And I think part of it was because of, was it her best friend, and I can't remember her name, Samara and Deepak. And they're like, we're matched. And again, lying to say that we're matched, you need to get matched too.
Exactly.
So another couple line that they got matched when they weren't matched, and then basically pressuring another couple to get the test.
And then the ironic twist that then it turns out that Deepak and Sally thought they were matched. Oh,
right. And then you find out they may not have been because of the whole thing with Tim. Kevin. Tim. Mark.
Mm-hmm.
Mark, Tim, whatever.
Yeah.
Whatever would go by.
Yeah.
But and how when he said they might not have never really been matched. It might have been a fake match, but they not fell in love, but they fell in the bed together because of it. That whole thing, that concept, when people tell you that this is what you should be doing, it's almost like a placebo effect, that you think that this is my match because something has told me this is what it is.
Mm-hmm. So I have a question though. I think for me, Nick and Alex were the most genuine relationship example, and they were both the most reticent that this match was actually real, except for they felt a connection to one another. And so I wondered, I mean, that was, they were the most least likely match, but they felt the strongest connection to one another, and they did the work to be together at the end. And I just wonder how we feel about that.
I mean, that's the one I'm not saying the only relationship I like, but that was the relationship that I truly believed in, really in this. When I talk about what a placebo effect, I was really referring to Sally and Deepak, that kind of thing. And then later, with that, but their relationship is the only two people who truly, I'm not looking for my match, or I'm not looking to match with this person. I want to be, as when Nick said, I want to marry you, Sally. That was it. But then once he meets Alex, and again, it wasn't like instantaneous, but it was close, because there was that one massage treatment, and it wasn't until the end when they felt that pull. They both felt that pull, and they both, as you said, neither one of them really wanted, because they both had relationships with other people. And so that's the only one that I truly believe in. Maybe the story of, well, not the only one, Christopher and Amy, because that was really different too. That truly to me seemed like a match, and they so much to get together and be together. I mean, and able and were willing to give each other up for other people. Because I mean, when was it Nick? When Sally said she was pregnant, Nick was going to give up Alex because he did not want to wanted her. He wanted to be in the life of his child. Now, once spoilers, ended up being not his child. He's, I mean, he did eventually, and Sally, I'm not gonna say fortuitously, but she dies, and he can go and see and actually be with Alex. But they were, to me, the most, I'm not saying purest or decent in a way relationships out of the ones that were in this book or the story.
Yeah.
I would say, I'm sorry. I would
No,
just
go
say
ahead.
each of these couples for me, I mean, at the end, it leaves such a stain or such of, moments of destruction and change that really causes me to go back to even with Ellie in terms of even finding this or discovering this gene in terms of the whole thing with trying to find your match. It really makes me feel like, Ellie, wondering if Ellie really, really, really thought that any of this would work, that, maybe she was hoping that it would truly happen. But even seeing when that lady came and attacked her, that some people just didn't agree with this, but she was still trying to push this along and thinking that it was going to really happen. And it also just tells us, just in life, a lot of us, that's what we're trying to do. It's almost like we're trying to squeeze or make something out of nothing that is real. And it makes you go back to figure out what's really important. So, I mean, I think it's just wild how each one of them, and it ends with such a mess to me. In the end,
you mentioned that, and it also kind of makes me think a little bit about the show and how different Ellie is in the book, and the main character in the show, I think her name was Rebecca in the show, kind of how they approached love and approached this whole experiment of matching. It did seem like Ellie was like trying to make something out of nothing. She was trying very hard, but she also, to me, in a sense, kind of didn't believe it for herself. In a sense, she didn't think, okay, I'm going to be matched. She wanted it to happen, but she didn't really think herself that she would. But to me, in the show, Rebecca, I mean, the first person she kind of tested it on was herself. And she inevitably, she wanted to be matched. Like that was in like the back of her mind. She wanted to be matched. And she really believed in what she was doing, not just because, wow, this science works, but wow, I want to be matched and I'm in love kind of thing. But I do want to move on and ask, because it's funny that we all talk about, except for like Nick and Sally, we all kind of talked about the relationships that we did not necessarily see in the show, and we thought that those were the most interesting. So if there's one thing that you can take from this book that you would want to see in season 2, what would that be?
Christopher and Amy.
Yeah.
Christopher and Amy.
Yes.
Christopher and Amy. Also Mandy and Richard. But Christopher and Amy, I feel like, unless you're going to tell me that the girl that the police officer matched with is actually a murderer, then I feel like we're missing that kind of edge to the story. And I think Mandy and Richard's story also has a bit of edge with his background and his mother and all of that. I think they chose to make it very cookie cutter and not have anything. I guess they felt like the premise itself was risky enough, so maybe they didn't want to put too much more into it. But I feel like they really watered it down, and what was suspenseful and what was engaging about the book, I feel like they took away from the core of the show.
Yeah. Dana, go ahead.
Now, I was just going to say, so for me, what I would actually kind of like to see is something I think that was touched on with Ellie and Tim/Mark is what happens when the data gets corrupted. Because that's kind of the world we're living in right now. We hear data breaches and junk like that all the time. So now I'm interested in people who paired up, left their husband, wife, swore they loved the other person, and come to find out that was never your one in the first place. Now what? Because I think kind of in like the desperation that Staci was talking about earlier, if you remember, like, I think it was with Jade, as a matter of fact, with Jade, she said she really wasn't feeling the brother at first. Like she never had that feeling, even though he was supposed to be the one, but she was just trying to, I guess, kind of push it and make it. And I'm thinking about people who, you've been told this is your one, this is your forever. And so people are like, well, I don't feel anything, but they don't want to say anything because whether the other person is really feeling it, they're not. Or, I want to see what happens because ultimately I think that's what would happen in real life. Somewhere something would go wrong, things would be messed up. And so I think in season 2, I'm ready. I love the idea of what you guys just talked about. And I don't know how they're going to do it, because you're right that now that she's gotten the sister character or the brother character, excuse me, unless he turns out to be a criminal. I don't know how they're going to do that, but
right.
I definitely would like to see what happens when the data is wrong, because that happens.
Yeah. And they kind of barely touched on the whole, they barely touched on it. Pam, what do you, you didn't see, I'm sorry, you didn't see the show, so you don't know, but what do you want to see when season 2 comes around?
Look, I'm excited. When Marcie was talking about Christopher and Amy, I was like, oh, wow, they're going to develop her even more. So I was excited about that. But I wonder if there's going to be something that comes back, and you all can help me about Mandy and Richard. Do you think something might kind of happen there? That might be something interesting to see.
Yeah, they're totally not in season 1 at all. So they have probably the best opportunity. They didn't amalgamate their character into somebody else or anything like that.
Nope.
Like to Dana's point, because Amy, the cop figure, is almost woven into the Jade. She's almost turned into Jade in some ways. And with a splash of Nick, it's kind of hard to but Mandy and Richard weren't touched at all, so they're fertile ground for a new storyline. I just hope they add in some of, to Dana's point, the what ifs and the other realities of the matching. I think they introduced a whole lot, but I don't know that they tied it together as well as the book does. And so I feel like there's all this craziness that's sitting out there. And the Ellie or the Rebecca like storyline, she's not nearly as complex as Ellie is. And the Tim Mark component isn't really clear. So I think there's opportunity there maybe, but then she's got that weird, like her match, but but he's hidden away. Like there's so many things that they created in the show that they almost didn't need to, because they had really good bones in the book. And I'm confused as to some of the choices that were made early on to do some of the things that they did when they had such rich characters to work from the book.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Dana, because now I think we're kind of stuck.
So the more you're talking, it just reminds me of like what we talked about with the original show. And I'm like, we also need to see ugly people. So what happens if your DNA match looks like, somebody's big toe? Like, how does that, because one of the things we talked about with this show is everybody is attractive. And they're all around the same age. Like, I don't know, would my DNA automatically match me up with somebody kind of, or would he be 50 years older than me? I don't know. That's why I think the show has so much potential, even though, yes, the book was better, the show is still going. So it has so much potential to bring it in now that they have this book. I don't know why. Like I said, I think I'm hoping they decided not to give it all away in the first season. And that's why we didn't get all the good stuff from the book. But there's definitely opportunity for a lot of stories. This series could go on for a while.
Yeah, I agree with you though. I think, and your what ifs are fantastic. Like, what if I never even thought of what if there was an age difference, because that's not, but you're right. Everybody was close to the same age, even if they were in different localities. And you're right. Most people were generally attractive-ish, but I think you're right. What happens if, and like, what happens if the person you're matched with is not able-bodied, or if, or differently abled, or any of those kinds of things. I'm interested to see some of those what ifs, and I hope those what ifs edge it up a little bit, because I do think they watered it down, and I'd like to see that suspense and that those twists that we got in the book. I'd like to see that same engaging kind of quality to season 2.
I'm laughing because I was thinking about the whole TV show Catfish. I was thinking that with some of these storylines, like you were mentioning, just with different people and different ages, different sizes of people, whatever the case may be, we may be dealing with a whole bunch of catfish happening along the way. So
hold your thought, Pam, because I think we will be back in just a few moments. Okay, so we are back, and Pam, you were mentioning catfishing. So elaborate a little bit on that, because I think we got a little cut off. From what you were saying.
And when you talk about catfishing, it's basically when someone like creates this fake persona or this fake identity in terms of tricking another person. And I would be interested in seeing some of that. And even linking when they were talking about the you flirt, I know Christopher talked a lot about how he connected with women that he ended up killing with the you flirt, but looking at how to tie that in and pull some of those other relationships that's coming out of the you flirt even, and then along with the whole idea of catfishing, because that happens a lot, I could imagine, on the online dating world or the online relationship type world. So just looking at those different aspects may be something to see in the actual television show.
To kind of piggyback on that a little bit, in the book, Ellie was basically being catfished because this guy was not really matched with her. He just perpetrated a fraud so he could get back at her.
Absolutely true.
And, come to think of it, if they hadn't kind of boxed themselves in season 1, y'all, they could have brought out this what if, like Dana was saying, what if there was a data breach or something went wrong? Basically, it opens up the opportunity for people to catfish other people. And that show is, MTV's Catfish, that show is big, right? That show was huge,
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
On the catfishing, it's like, that wasn't the only one. If you think about it, catfishing, Mandy and Richard were catfished because she was catfishing and believing that he was dead, and his mother and his sister talked about his personality, what kind of person was, but when we talked to his girlfriend, he got a whole different persona or really personality that was him. So that was catfishing right there. And we most definitely had that with Jade and Kevin / Mark, even though he didn't realize he was catfishing her, she was being catfished.
Yeah.
That's absolutely true.
Yeah. Big time.
And so, and to me, this goes back to the whole science part of this that makes me wonder. So now I'm starting to wonder with the whole Tim Mark thing, since he's not actually her match, was she just genuinely in love with him? Because all the feelings that I'm supposed to get are like these feelings that I imagine I can only get with my one. So then what, was she lying? Like,
I think that was part of my question early on. I think that's part of when I said, do people change themselves because this person is supposed to be their match? Do they change themselves and try to convince themselves that is true, even if that's not what they feel? Because you're right, at least with Jade, she was very clear at the beginning that she didn't feel it. He was just in an unfortunate situation. But Ellie, although she knew she didn't quote unquote feel it, kept trying to convince herself mentally that okay, so he's not my type in this way, but maybe I like a man who blah, blah, blah. You see what I'm saying? Like, I think she was trying to convince herself into it, even though her gut told her this is not my match.
Right.
Well, I think that goes to what I've said at the beginning about a placebo effect. Someone is telling you that should be your match, or something is telling you that should be your match. Mm-hmm. And you're taking every positive thing as being, that's why they're the one. For all of them, Ellie believed in her science, and that my science is correct, that if he's my match, he should be my match. And she was totally disregarding how her initial feeling is. I guess maybe because she was the creator of finding it, and she doesn't seem like she has ever been in love or had that kind of relationship like that with a person, that she couldn't really read whether that was actually something more in depth. I know when we see her background, or not see, but when we read a little bit about her background, it doesn't show that she had a major love or was a person who did a lot of dating or anything. Like, we don't know if she's ever really felt strong emotion for someone, love-like emotion, even if it's not love. But I think it was easier for her to kind of fall into, I'm not really feeling it, but I've never felt it. Maybe the stuff that I'm eventually feeling is becoming that. And he's also catering to her, though, like seeing, oh, she seems like this kind of person, so I'm going to do like this to do that. I mean, he was the ultimate catfish, but in a way, I think she was falling for it because she believed in her science so much that he had to be the one. So anything she read as positive for our relationship, that was leading up to him being the one. And that's also what Jade and Kevin, she wasn't feeling it, but she was feeling guilty because she couldn't feel it. But I think she at least experienced, had more experience in love or loving someone than Ellie. And so she kind of knew he wasn't the match for her, even though she didn't want to really admit it to herself in that way. Totally off the subject, not totally off the subject of the book. But for me, when I was reading Jade and Kevin, part of me was thinking that maybe he was. I didn't really think of the brother at first until later. But I was thinking maybe because of the fact that he had cancer, and then he had cancer treatments, and that, to me, that might have thrown off.
That's what I was thinking too.
That's what I initially thought.
Yep. That's what I was thinking too. Because he had cancer, maybe that was kind of throwing off some of that response, because maybe I think he had a radiation or a chemotherapy treatment or something like that. That was possibly messing with the DNA or messing with the science of it all. And that was why they couldn't feel that feeling or whatever.
And the rabbit hole just gets deeper.
Yeah.
Yes. That's what I really thought, was because of that maybe that's why she wasn't feeling it.
Yeah, I mean,
but now, Staci, to your question, okay. Now I'm like, okay, so the head of this business has never really been in love. Well, then I don't know that I want her. How does she know that this is working? Like, that's kind of odd. Like, she's never had this feeling, but she really wants everybody else to have it or make money from it.
I'm not even sure if she really wants everyone to have it, but I would have to really read the book again on how she really felt about it.
But I kind of felt like the same way. I don't think she really, and I was saying this earlier, I don't think she really had that love feeling, or that was why she was doing it, because she wanted to find that love feeling, which is different.
Well, yeah, I agree. Like, I thought in my mind, and this is probably partially from the show, she's this businesswoman, high-ranking businesswoman, and we know the trope: high-ranking businesswomen, you cannot have a personal life. So I felt like that's kind of how she chose business over her personal life. But then back to the whole science thing, I'm like, you liking stuff I like and doing things that I like to do and complimenting me and buying me gifts should not bring on the same feeling that a molecular DNA love. That's why I think it's like Staci said, she was forcing herself into this. But in my mind, I'm like, anybody could come up in here and be like, oh, you look pretty, let me take you to dinner. That's not enough in my mind to get this DNA love that everybody was talking about.
But I think, again, it's the placebo effect, that she, even though normally if someone was complimenting her, she wouldn't think anything of it, or it wouldn't be the same thing. But also you have the fact that this person is supposed to be my one. It takes that whole "you look beautiful" has greater weight than some random guy saying "you look beautiful today." You know,
No, I mean, I agree.
I think that might be she was
herself.
doing more. Yeah, she lied to herself, but I think it was really just because she believed in her science. She took more weight on what he was saying versus because she believed he was her one.
Let me ask you this, because I don't remember now with the book. Okay. How did this even go? Because again, I would think, and this is something the show did, is she was one of the first people to do her match on the show. So which would make sense to me if this is your creation, right? So I don't remember in the book how she even got to her match. Oh, somebody sent it to her.
She got sent because he hacked into the system and said that this was the match. He was whatever. She never, in the book, at that point, she had discovered this, but never found it for herself. And what basically it initiated was she was experimenting, and they kind of bring this in the book, getting people's DNA without their consent.
Right.
And that's what she did in the book and in the movie. But in the book, it showed that by getting people without their consent, she got the DNA of his dad. Because I think his dad worked there too. And his dad found and got his match and left the mom. And then the mom gets her match, and her match is a pedophile, as they say in England.
Right.
Gives it all up for him. I mean, she basically empties her bank account to keep him out of jail or whatever for his legal fees, and stood behind him, So basically tearing his family life apart, because first thing is that she did the DNA thing without his father's consent and finding his match without, and then that kind of thing. And then second, his mother's match is this pedophile. And his family is destroyed, and that's why he's going for her. And he's the same person that spit on her or threw stuff on her or whatever. Same person, except he didn't do it in her face like that. He did it behind her back and did it so that destroyed her completely.
Yeah.
My question, I think, was, and what I just found odd that I actually, in this case, as we talk more about it, feel like maybe the show did better, is I find it hard to believe that the person who invents this doesn't know her own match or wouldn't even look into it.
Yes.
She did look into her match. She put her stuff out there, but she hadn't gotten a match yet.
Right. And he was so inside her system, anything she
might have had one.
Would not have, he would have already validated. Remember, he was well in her system.
Well, no, but he should have known her match was before anybody else. I mean, this is something you do when you're beta testing.
But she did try, but it's not a guarantee. You put your match out there, the other person has to put their stuff out there. And if that person hasn't, she's not going to find a match. Regardless, I could be beta testing all my life and put it in, but if my whole thing is someone else has to put theirs in.
But did she even, I don't know, I guess I didn't get the impression that she was even looking.
Well, I think she did put her stuff, she did. It wasn't a matter, that's the whole reason she got it, was because she has put her match,
already out there.
Put her DNA out there. She just has never gotten a match back from that, which I also think leads to that, because she's been, her being the face of the one, and she does not have the one. I think that's also leading her to fall for him even harder because of that too.
But again, that's why I feel like in that area the show was a little better, because she had a fake the one. Yeah. It's just hard for me. And I'm sure this happens because obviously we have men who are selling, I'm thinking about labor and people talking about how horrible the clothes were this year. But anyway, and they're talking about a whole bunch of men sitting up there making decisions. So I know it can happen, but to have somebody who's never experienced love, hasn't found the one to do, being the head person spokesman for it all, just seems kind of, but in the show, she had it. And so it felt to me a little bit more believable, because you saw her, you were like, oh, this is what I want. Look at her husband. They have a beautiful relationship. I just think it was different in the book. And I guess if I had to say maybe areas where maybe the show was a little bit more realistic to me, I would give it that, if I'm trying to give it anything, because the book was better. Here's the thing. So I didn't really talk about it, but her story wasn't that interesting to me in the book. I thought it was okay, but it didn't sit as realistic to me, I guess.
Okay, so you like her character in the show better than the book. Is that what you just
said? Didn't love her character anywhere. So let's be honest.
I'm just saying. Right, I'm just saying out of the two she liked.
Yeah, I felt like to some of it, because like the whole murder and stuff, some of it was just like, I think they were probably equally just messed up, but in that one area of believability, the show, I think, felt better than the book.
Well, I can agree with you on that, because especially when it comes to stuff like that, we want to see the spokesmodel. You know, if she's going to be a spokesmodel, she needs to have something like that. But if you think about the realm of science, the scientist doesn't have to have that cancer to do the cancer research. I mean, you don't have, Brandon, I don't want to say love is cancer, but a lot of things, because of science, they don't necessarily have to have had that disease to find, or have that syndrome or whatever, to try to find a cure or a cause for it. I mean, some of them do, but a lot of them don't. And I think if you go from a science perspective, that can be believable. But if you're going by the spokesmodel, it's like, if I'm going to a weight loss thing and it's good in the and they had never lost weight, you know, or needed to lose weight. It's like, so you're going to be there and not, you know, you 100 pounds soaking wet. I mean, you're going to be the spokesperson and you've never had to worry about that. If you think of it as that kind of, yes, it'd be more believable if she found her one too.
And that's the difference too, now that you mention it. Like, I don't feel like in the book she was a spokesperson, but I definitely felt like she was that in the show, because they kept having her go to events and talk and do stuff. But I don't remember that in the book.
In the book, she was more like, I wouldn't say they didn't use her as a spokesperson. She was the science behind it and the creator, but she was not, to me, they didn't focus as much on that aspect of it.
In the book, she was already in the controversy.
Yes.
When we met her, so she was trying to lay low. But it doesn't start in the show until after they introduce her and how it happened and all that, and then you see where she is today. But I think in the book, she was dating him basically because she had time, because she was trying to lay low from all the legal stuff. You know, I think it felt a little bit different from those two perspectives. And I do think that she was definitely more visible on the show. She was a lot more visible, but her relationship was hidden. I think in both cases, her relationship is weirdly hidden. Dana, you're right. I never thought about it like that. But yeah, in both cases, they don't really, because even in the show, she's got that weird, the person she's matched to, but he's hidden somewhere, and then she's dating this guy, but kind of keeping that quiet too, until of course everything blows up. Tragic. It did make me question all of their security protocols,
all of that.
Like, how are you dealing with this many people's data? And I mean, he could have been the best, but it sounded like it was easier than it should have been for him to do what he did within her system. And for nobody to notice for so long the number of people's data that he manipulated. Nowhere in the system did it flag that these records were changing and that something was happening. That concerned me.
Did he really do it too? I don't know, because he said it to her, and how does she even verify? How would she know? Like,
where's her control data?
Right. You know how we are as a world. If somebody even says that, then it's actually believable. Like, it only takes one person to be like, I don't think this is a match. I think the data's messed up. And half the people gonna be like, oh no, mine isn't right. I really wasn't supposed to be matched. You only have to put that out there in the universe to be a maybe. He could have done much of nothing, but to put it out as a maybe, it's over.
And then she killed him, so there's not really a way to dig any deeper, because it was I was like, this seems like a very unfortunate thing. You didn't even ask, you know, to your point, Dana, not any of the important questions before she killed him. I was like,
right, exactly.
Okay, that's one way to do it.
But yet, to Dana's point, in the show, there's backstory about Ellie's character that we do not get in the book. We just get her being the big CEO. We get that point. That's the starting point of her story for us. In the show, we get backstory from when they were just doctoral candidates or whatever, trying to figure this out. And then we also get, and then I think what happens is when she actually becomes the face of the company is because of that backstory. What she did when they got the 1 million matches, and then they were like, oh, this could be a big thing. And then, it all comes out of how they actually ended up getting the DNA, or end up getting the DNA, and how they ended up, and then they ended up having to kill their roommate or whatever, and all of that stuff. So all of that stuff kind of makes Rebecca on the show who she is and puts her as the face. Whereas in the book, Ellie is just a scientist who, of course, somebody who founds the company also ends up being, on the board or something. So she's also the CEO, but she's also laying low, and we don't exactly know all of the backstory behind why she doesn't have a match, or why didn't she test this on herself, or all of that stuff. We don't have that backstory. It makes her seem a little bit naive, because I'm thinking, you're a scientist, you have been doing this for so long that you've made this multi-billion-dollar company, and then now you're falling for a guy who you're not actually sure you're matched with. It's weird. I do want to ask one last question, which is what I always ask when we do book chats, is if we were rating this book on Goodreads, and on the Goodreads scale from 1 to 5, quickly tell me what y'all would rate it. A 1-star rating is I didn't like it. A 2-star rating is it was okay. A 3-star rating, I liked it. A 4-star rating, I really liked it. And a 5-star rating, it's awesome sauce, or it's amazing. Since Pam is the newbie, I'm going to pick on her one more time. Pam, what would you rate this book if you were rating it on Goodreads, a star rating from 1 to 5?
I would rate it a 4. Why would I rate it a 4? I just love all the twists and turns. I know I'm sitting here like, what? I think it's an exciting read in terms of it continues to move. So I think it's a good book, and people should definitely check it out.
All right, cool. We got 1 4. Staci, what about you?
Can I do a 4.5? No.
Yes, you can.
I would say a 4.5. I'm rating it based on when I drive, and it's like an 8-hour drive. Well, if I get to the place and I'm not trying to wait till I drive back home to listen, but I actually listen to it, get out the car and continue to listen to it, that makes it a good book for me. I've had a little bit better, so that's why I don't want to do a 5, but 4.5 is where this was. Very good read, kept my attention the whole car ride there, except for when I got to Atlanta where I had to concentrate. So concentrate on the road. But other than that, it was a great book. I really enjoyed it.
Marcie, what about you, star rating?
I would have to give it a 4.75. It was highly engaging. I liked the characters. I liked the story. I want to give room for potential improvement, but all in all, it was very close to Awesome Sauce. I definitely loved it. I actually read it and wanted to read it, and again was able to immediately determine that it was not the show, and to be able to appreciate them separately. So yeah, 4.75 for me. I enjoyed it, and I would read something else from him.
Dana.
Yes, so I am with Staci on this one. I'm giving it a 4.5. I enjoyed the show, but this book showed me like how much better it could have potentially been. The book was outstanding. I'm glad you guys forced me to start reading it, and I would definitely recommend. I honestly think this is probably one of the best books I've read this year.
Oh, awesome. So thank you all for being here. My rating, of course, is going to be a 4.5 as well. But thank you, everyone, for being here. I'm so glad you got to read this book and that you enjoyed it so much. And thanks for hanging out with me and talking with me about it.
Bye.
Thank you for having us.
Oh, this was awesome. Thank you.
So that's it for this episode. Please subscribe to Nerdy Romantics podcast wherever you get your podcasts to be notified anytime a new episode drops. And if you like what you're hearing, please rate and review. The links are in my show notes at ymnelson.com, along with a lot of other links for books and other items that we talked about on our show. And if you really like what you're hearing, click the Buy Me a Coffee button while you're there to support us. Thank you for listening.